been on a sabbatical away from social media, and I haven't been too social personally either, save for just a few people. And I've been really using this time to clear my head, make sense of my heart space, and deal with some grief and some trauma that I was doing a really good job with masking until it came to intimate relationships where I was kind of just bleeding over all the people that I was supposed to be loving. So this past, I would say almost past year, honestly, I have been going through very intense and personal experiences that I've been fortunate to have a support system as I work through, but it's still been very much so private, save for just the few people that I've, confided in. So I say all of that to lead into what I want to talk about for the next few minutes, and it is the importance of healing the familial relationships before we venture out to begin creating other ones. I am 33 years old and the mother of 3, and I've had 3 serious relationships that bore me these children. And in retrospect, all of these relationships that I ran to was because I was running from a less than desirable home situation. So my ideal of family has always been this very Cosby-like atomic structure, because it was the one that I felt that I missed out on growing up. So from that catalyst of a broken home to spiraling through relationships that failed because we were holding each other to unrealistic standards, I am forced to go back and look at the home situation that I was in a rush to leave. Many of you guys know that the last relationship that I was in, it was a terrible breakup. It was very much so publicized on social media, from me being put out to me having to go stay in an apartment of someone who, essentially gifted us an apartment and a place to stay, to, again, ending back at my mother's and then having out to transition. So the past 3 years for me have been very tumultuous and very stressful, to say the least. And what it's taught me was that we as people, as a culture, we really need to start to have the hard conversations about what happens in our homes. If your family is anything like my family, there were policies in place, kind of like Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens in this house stays in this house. And that way of thinking has trapped many generations. In my personal narrative, I can say 3 at least. We have 3 generations of women who have not been vocal about the trauma that they endured almost all of their lives, and then from that injured place, they have taken on the work of raising and rearing their own families. And this, I found with sharing my story, is a very common narrative that while we, hold it close to our chest, like this was only our household that had some of these sicknesses, when you start to talk about it more, you realize that this is more common than it should be, and it almost takes on the shape of a cultural phenomenon. So just a little bit of my story. I'm kind of beating around the bush. I've started to write. The title of my book, I actually have two that I haven't decided on. It's either Protecting Mama, or it's what's the other one? The House That Hale Built. My personal story is I was born of a 16-year-old who was a virgin at the time. She'd been being sexually assaulted from right there in her home. My grandmother's husband had been taking advantage of my mother from the time she was 6 until she got pregnant with me at 16. While she was simultaneously being abused sexually, my grandmother was being beaten to a point where she didn't feel a defense. She couldn't defend her children. And again, it was no men around other than, the men who were the abusers. Now, this story sounds heart-wrenching until you realize that what was happening in the home with my mother and my grandmother was also happening in the home with my great-grandmother and my grandmother. This model of having a husband to abuse your child actually happened with my grandmother as well, with her own biological father. Now, this is a story that right now, if my grandmother heard me sharing, she would be very much so in her feelings about. Because if it were not for me, it would still be very much so secret that my mother went through these things. But it is hard to hide a secret when the secret comes of age and the secret has a voice and the secret is sitting there asking you questions. And I am the secret. So with me uncovering this with my own mother, and then again having questions about how did this come about? How does this even come? You start to get into the narratives of the other secrets that are buried along with me and, my grandmother's household secret. So it turns out that my grandmother had been abused by her own biological father. I don't know how long this has happened because I have not gotten this confirmed through direct conversation with my grandmother. She's still very much so in a place where when we approach her with it, she freezes up. She rejects our questions, and she will not too long have to leave the space. It becomes such a pressure and a burden for her to talk about. So what I've gotten was that she'd been being abused, and actually my aunt is the child of her and her own biological father. And growing up in Gary, I had no insight into any of this. So my childhood was just normal for me. I always knew that the family was small. I always knew that there weren't men around. But I never dug into it. And then I got older and I realized that almost all of the other family, they kind of leave us. They kind of just, they separate from us. So that was another thing that I always questioned, like, why are we kind of just in this alone? So just piecing together the familial story of my own family as I try to correct and salvage what can be salvaged for my own children, I am more than positive that there needs to be space created for our community to be able to share similar experiences and to be able to start the process to heal from these experiences. Emotional wellness did not take on importance for me until maybe about 2 years ago when I started to eat alkaline, being health conscious, starting from what I felt that I had the strength to, alter first, which was diet. It showed me very clearly that I had thoughts and feelings that I needed to check, because the clarity in diet allowed me to better see my thoughts and feelings and what were causing them. So with that, I was able to step into healing the emotional aspect of me in a way that I don't think that I would have been able to had I not had the clarity of a diet change first. But as I work through this connection with emotions and diet, it also triggers in me that a lot of what I have taken on the path to do has been to help my family. Even with the diet, I wanted to promote a better way of eating because my mom suffered with being overweight. My grandmother is on medications daily, a gallon-sized bag worth. So I knew that I needed to create a new path and a way of living. And as I go further into this, I am seeing just how much so the path needs to be cleared and refreshed. Let's go this way. Excuse me, it's a terrible accident. I hope everybody's okay. But yeah, it just shows me how much work there really is to do. How diet is just the very tip of the iceberg. And again, as we talk about diet, it's a very interesting thing to note that most people who are obese, they have dealt with some type of trauma that they have not been able to heal from and rectify. So it gives you new eyes to look at the issues that we are facing when it comes to issues of weight and health issue. And with my new awareness, I would dare say that all of those things are rooted in our inability to cope with perpetuated trauma that we have inherited and that we continue to propagate, save for our lack of better tools. I feel like I didn't tell this story as concisely as I could have with being distracted a bit with driving, but I do feel like I got the point across with sharing that there are a lot of ugly parts underneath me sharing all the beauty. And just because I choose not to share those ugly parts with you does not mean that they are not there and that I'm not consciously and continually working through them. And I share this as a gateway for anyone who has suffered through a situation that's similar, or who is suffering through a situation that's similar, or who is the fruit of a tree that, again, should have never been. I give you my love, and I hope that with it comes courage for you to share and not be suppressed. Because your own family will suppress your story because they're not ready to deal with it. And to that I say, your story is your story. And you have to deal with the things that you need to deal with for you to be a whole person, irregardless of anyone's perspective or influence. And I just hope to encourage you to know that the first step in healing this is to acknowledge it and to choose different. I am proud to say that my daughters have been the first children in the last 3 generations that have not been sexually touched or taken advantage of at 6. 6 seems to be the age. That was the age where I was first molested. That was the age my mother was first molested. And who knows what was happening in my great-grandmother's house with my grandmother and her father. So it's sad to have a milestone that is such a low-lying fruit. But if we are honest with ourselves, most of us are in this place of coming out of such darkness where we have to acknowledge the fact that that is a milestone. As sloppy and as horrendous and as sick as it is to come from, we have picked up things as a culture of people that we have to be very diligent in giving back. And not even giving back. We don't need to give this back. We need to kill this shit exactly where it is now. We are seeing the culture go to shit with pedophilia being a sexual orientation. And again, to come from a place where most of us have this secretive home life of abuse, to go into the external world where they are justifying this level of trauma. We are creating a system that will perpetually leave us traumatized. So I hope me sharing has opened somebody's awareness to, just how ugly some things are behind well-groomed aesthetics. There is strength in sharing. This is not my first time sharing this story. This is my first time being on a camera doing it. But again, I hope to help more than the people that I just have the blessing to come across every day. And I hope this was helpful for you. Peace, love, and light.